I always knew that I would die in the cabin. There are things here that I can't explain, dangerous things, born from all the misery this place has seen over the 100+ years that it's been standing. I tell myself that I know how they work. I know the rules of their existence when I could be in danger. But if the last few nights have been any indication, I know nothing at all. I'll start at the beginning. Except I'm not sure exactly where the beginning is. There are photos of the cabin dating back to the 1940s. My grandma standing in front as a little girl, hair tied back in a braid, the hem of her dress coasting along the barren ground. But there are also diary entries from my great-great-grandma Josephine talking about the cabin, about the thing that lives in the crawl space. That would be before the turn of the century. The cabin itself sits along the edge of a pine forest in southwestern Alaska, near the town of Crooked Creek. The west side of the house is the original log cabin, all dark wood and thick glass windows distorting your reflection. The east side was added on later, and it looks like a garden variety 70s ranch, white siding and red shutters. My brothers, of course, up and left, took their pretty little wives and their babies and got the hell out of here. It's always the women of the family that are stuck caretaking, isn't it? My parents were as progressive as they come, yet I got left with caretaking for the cabin, caretaking them. Not that I minded. My parents were lovely human beings that I miss every single day of my life. There was nothing that I would rather do than take care of them in their final years. Speaking of my brothers, they say that I'm passively suicidal for staying here. How nice of them. I have my reasons, and one of them is not get eviscerated by the thing that lives in the crawl space. Besides, it's not like I have any dependents, not even pets, that I'm risking by staying here. I do have a boyfriend of several months, but it isn't serious, and I never gave him my address. The picture that he will forever hold in his mind of the cabin is some cute, quaint little thing in a snowy mountaintop, haloed by a peach sunrise. Worth the risk. Well, I hadn't died yet. It was presently March, which may sound nice, the first signs of spring. But of course, up in Alaska, March is still a frozen hellscape. March is also the most dangerous season. That liminal stretch of dead winter before the first sighs of spring, when the days start getting longer and the fangs are taken out of the dead cold. That's when they start going back to sleep. And they don't like going back to sleep. I have everything detailed in my journal. Hundreds of notes, exactly what to do and not to do to stay alive. Some of them were taken from notes in my great-great-grandmother's journal. Most I found out myself through trial and error. The rules of staying alive at 163 Mountain Avenue are somewhat simple. 1. The west side of the house is blocked by a room divider. Never remove the divider. Never look directly at the divider. Looking at its reflection in a mirror is okay. Never enter the west side of the house even if you hear cries for help, even if those cries for help sound like a child. 2. If you wake up and find footprints circling the cabin, stay inside. They will most likely be gone the next morning and it'll be safe to exit. 3. If you find a set of footprints going to the cabin and none going back, leave the cabin immediately. Do not return until the next morning. 4. There are no bodies of water within 3 miles of the cabin. If you think you see water in the woods or any kind of reflection, close the blinds and stay inside. 5. The only neighbor in sight of the cabin is the Weber family, 1/10 of a mile west through the woods. If you see any other cabins or structures, do not approach them. Close the blinds and stay inside. 6. Cell phone reception is spotty up here in the mountains, which is why we have a landline. Use it. 7. Never enter the crawl space below the cabin for any reason. 8. If an old lady knocks on the door, give her what she asks. So far, she has asked for a spoonful of sugar, a pinch of salt, a cup of flour, a corkscrew, a ladle. I think when people see rules set out like this, they think it's black and white. That following the word of the law will keep you 100% safe, and breaking the rules will make you 100% dead. Well, that's not quite true. Just like there are all kinds of exceptions to traffic laws, there are nuances to these laws too. For example, you might notice that some of the rules contradict each other. If I ever see footprints leading to the cabin concurrently with either circling footprints, fake reflections, or new neighbors, I'm going to be screwed. Do I leave because of the footprints, or do I stay because of all the other stuff? This is a scenario that I've been scared of since my parents had died, but it hasn't happened. I guess all the occurrences are so rare, the chances of two happening at once is pretty slim. Either that or the entities avoid each other too. Another example of the rules being inconsistent, I've accidentally looked at the room divider twice without repercussion. I haven't been able to figure out why. Maybe because it was between the hours of midnight and 3. Maybe it was because I wasn't wearing my glasses and it somehow knew I couldn't see it clearly. These are notes that live in the margins of the journal, but I haven't found out how they exactly fit in the puzzle of this place. Someday, maybe I will nail down exactly what can and can't happen here. But it's been 15 years that I've been working on this solo, since my parents had passed, and I haven't found it yet. For example, my entry on the old woman also says, usually comes between 8 p.m. and midnight, always knocks 3 times, always will ask for a pantry item or a utensil. Keep the pantry well stocked with measuring cups and utensils. It doesn't seem to discriminate between varieties of things, like kosher salt, sea salt, table salt, all works for salt. Avoid eye contact just in case. Don't speak back to her just in case. And my notes on the crawl space man, though you could hardly call it a man. Always keep the board nailed down in the corner of the bedroom closet. There's a little opening down to the crawl space and we don't want it to get in. Thankfully, it hasn't seemed to notice yet. I started this morning like any other, with the checks. Once in the morning, once at night. I check that everything is as it should be. I check if the west side is occupied. I look out the window for footprints. I check the bedroom closet, and so on. I started with the west side of the house. Years ago, I tried to install a wall between that and the rest of the house, but it didn't like that. Apparently, it needs light from the east side of the house to behave. I put one of those Soji-style room dividers up with the translucent rice paper stretched over a wooden grid, and that seemed to work. It's only there about 1/3 of the time, and on days that it's gone, I always breathe a little bit easier. I pulled out my pocket mirror and walked backwards down the hallway. The reflection jumped with each step. I tried to focus, keep my hand steady. I stared at the white paper of the divider, foggy and ethereal with morning sunlight. Closer, closer. I stopped short. My hand started to shake. A small blurry figure stood behind the room divider, a fleshy blob of a face, bright purple and teal for a coat, a little blue hat, standing perfectly still on the other side of the room divider. I tried to not focus on the fact that there were no darker blobs for eyes, no pinker blob for a mouth. And then it raised its purple arm and waved at me. I dropped the mirror and ran down the hallway. It waved at me. It's never done that before. I grabbed my laptop and the journal. I'd go to a coffee shop for a while, try to figure out if that meant anything. But I didn't want to be here while I did that, because what if it came through? What if the wave meant something? I threw the front door open, started towards the car. I stopped dead. Across the road through the trees, I could see a cabin. Thick smoke chugged out of the chimney. The windows glowed a welcoming yellow. The savory smell of meat and spices lingered in the air. I darted back inside. I locked myself in my bedroom, collapsed on the bed, and tried to get my thoughts straight. The child had interacted with me before, sort of. I had heard a call for help once, though it stayed silent when I got there, and it had leaned forward towards the room divider so that its form was halfway clear. I had tried to scrub the mental image of that. It had never waved, never directly interacted with me like that. I rifled through the stuff on my desk. The journal wasn't there. I peeked back out into the living room, but I didn't see it on the kitchen table either. Where did I put it? I wrote the note on a scrap of paper instead, and I set it on top of my desk. I would add it later when I found it. But I didn't find the journal before bedtime that night. You're always losing everything, I scolded myself. This place isn't even that big. I tossed and turned, pulling the blanket tighter around me. It was cold and I was almost out of firewood. I would have to go out tomorrow morning and get some. When I woke up that morning, I took another look around for the journal, and then I put on my coat and boots and I grabbed the axe from the garage, ready to split some more wood. The chill was creeping through the walls and the embers glowing low in the fireplace. I opened the door and saw them. Footprints. Tons and tons of them circling around the cabin, spiraling towards it, disturbing the pristine snow. I can't go outside now. I glanced at the dying embers. It would be getting cold tonight, so cold, but I couldn't leave the house until tomorrow morning, when the footprints were gone. The next 24 hours were going to suck. As I stood there in front of the windows, though, a chilling thought occurred to me. The footprints were a rare occurrence. I usually only saw them a few times a year, and usually in the fall, not the spring. The footprints were here just when I needed more firewood. It almost seemed more than coincidence. Oh, that's ridiculous, I told myself. How would they even know that you're low on firewood? And besides, there had been other times I needed to leave the house for wood or food or water. They had never circled the house purposely to block me. We were creatures living in parallel, ignoring each other until we crossed paths. Unless they had found my journal. Well, then they knew that I never leave the house when I see the footprints, and by the decreased smoke from the chimney, they would know that I needed firewood. No, that was ridiculous. Was it? But I still hadn't found the journal. The last place that I had it was. I clapped a hand over my mouth. I had run out with it after seeing the child wave. Did I drop it outside? I still had the laptop, but did I drop the journal? I leaned forward, peering out the window into the snow. It wasn't there. If I had dropped it, someone or something had taken it. Oh, you're being paranoid, grasping at straws. I stared out the window at the footprints, deep blue in the early morning light. I wrapped my sweater tightly around myself. It was going to be a long day. That night, I sat in my bedroom with the door locked. I had checked the child on the west side one more time and it didn't seem to be coming out. It waved at me again though, and I didn't like that. It was so terribly bitterly cold. I was wearing a t-shirt and a sweater and a zipped fleece over that. I had then wrapped myself in my blanket and put part of it over my face to warm the air. But I was still cold. My ears were cold, my face was cold. The cold was like a hunger, gnawing at every part of my body. I tried to focus on reading. The internet was spotty again and I couldn't get a good connection. My boyfriend Michael had been texting me, but I hadn't been able to send a text back. I was actually glad for it this time. I wasn't in the mood for talking to him. It was about 10 o'clock when I heard the knocking. 3 thumps. I never ignored the knocking. And so I heaved myself off the bed out into the living room and looked through the peephole. The old woman stared back at me, her face distorted and monstrous through the fisheye of the peephole. Red cloth tied over her balding head. I yanked open the door. All things considered, the old lady was one of the least threatening things here. I didn't mind her too much. I smiled and locked my eyes on a whorl of wood on the porch railing, just over her shoulder. I waited for her to speak. "I would like a teaspoon of salt," she said, her head wobbling as she spoke, her voice warbling. I nodded and started to walk back into the house, but then she called out to me, "Oh, sea salt, please." I froze. She had never specified the kind of salt before. I turned around. I didn't look her straight in the eye, but even in my side view, I could see that she was grinning. She knows. All the blood had drained out of my face. They have the journal. They know. I ran into the kitchen, into the pantry, and jars clanked, boxes toppled on each other. Crap, we had a box of kosher salt, and a teeny tiny shaker filled with what was probably not sea salt. And even if it were, it was less than a teaspoon, all crystallized up the sides. "I'm waiting, dear," came the sing-song voice of the old woman from the porch. I screwed the cap off the salt shaker, grabbed a spoon and scraped the sides. Some of the salt came off. I held my breath and walked over to the open door, holding out the spoon for her to take. "A teaspoon of sea salt," I said, with as much confidence as I could muster. For a moment she was still, grinning at me, eyes glittering in the yellow porch lights. I stared at the whorl in the banister. I kept my eyes locked on it, refusing to look her in the eye. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw that her mouth had fallen open. Her jaw slowly stretched downwards, all the way to her chest, stretching open the dark, oblong void of her mouth. It took all of my self-control to not look at it, to keep it blurry and out of focus. She lurched forward and I slammed the door. I frantically turned all the deadbolts. I had only ignored her request once before, the first time that she had visited, because keeping the door closed seemed safer than opening it. That night now came back to me in flashes. The scratching on the roof, the thumping from within the walls, a ripping sound at 2 a.m., a crack in the drywall, a contorted, wrinkled, naked body, a grin. I ran to the guest bedroom and locked the door. I whirled around, panting, but how would you save yourself from something that can bite through walls? I had done everything that I could. I had replaced the roof so that she couldn't get in. I always kept the pantry stocked. She had never asked for a specific kind of something before. And salt, specifically salt. Kosher, seed, table, it all works for salt. That's what I had written. They had my journal, they took it. All the things that I wrote in the margins, the notes to myself to keep safe from them. They knew them all. I couldn't leave unless the footprints were gone in the morning. Icy wind blew against the house, breathing through the cracks, sliding over the back of my neck. I shivered. The fire had long since died, but the thumping sounds on the roof, the old woman was starting to plot her route into my walls again. I couldn't leave because of the footprints, unless I wanted my head hanging from a tree. I was trapped. Another knock at the door. 3 thumps. But I could hear the old woman clawing through my walls now, so it wasn't her. Which meant I threw my bedroom door open and raced to the front door, and I pressed my ear against the wood. "Nora?" The voice murmured on the other side. "Daddy," I whispered. "It's me, sweetheart." I began to sob. And now you know the real reason that I stay here. Why it's worth risking my life and following rules trying to figure out everything to keep this place safe. It was the only way that I could hear their voices again. "I miss you," I whispered. "So much. The old lady's here and I'm scared." "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Can I open the door, please?" "No, sweetheart." Mom and Dad never let me open the door or even look through the peephole. They didn't want me to see them like this. Replace the memory of their smiles with something decayed and frozen. Tears ran down my cheeks as the thumping from within the walls got louder. I had been so careful, so safe. I rubbed the shiny white scar on my arm. Although it wasn't the pain that I was afraid of, it was her face, jaw hanging down to her chest, the void of her mouth impossibly black, like it led to another dimension. "What if she comes in?" I whispered. I had no idea how he could hear me on the other side of the heavy wooden door, but he did. "I know you'll escape," my dad's voice said in a low, gravelly tone. "I know, just like I know that I love you. I love you too." And that was it. I could feel his presence leave just as if he were a part of myself, breaking off and fluttering away. he was gone. "No," I sobbed, collapsing on the ground, pulling my knees up to my chest. It was never enough time. A drop when I needed a downpour. But I would still give everything for that drop. The tearing sounds grew louder. For a moment, I wanted to throw the door open and run to my car. Forget about the footprints and the stupid rule that I couldn't look at my father. Forget the old woman crawling through my walls. But then my head would be hanging from a tree, and I would never get to talk to my parents again. I walked into the garage and grabbed the axe that leaned against the wall. I picked it up, hefting it in my hands, and then I walked back into the living room. I stared at the lifeless black eyes of the deer head hanging on the wall as I listened to the tearing sounds. Took 2 steps to the left, 1 step back. I tapped my fingertips along the drywall, pinpointing the noise. There. I lifted the axe and swung. And I swung and swung and swung, eyes half closed, too scared to look, swinging like a madman. With all the anguish built up inside me, I wasn't going to deal with this. Not anymore. The axe tore through the wall like paper. When my arms grew too weak to raise the axe, I stepped back and opened my eyes. Dark liquid stained the inside of the wall. A few white hairs clung to the wooden studs. But the old woman, I heard thumping sounds, offbeat and limping, somewhere from above me. I saw a blur of motion out of the corner of my eye out the window, something falling from the rooftop. Dark liquid dripping in the snow, a shadow disappearing into the woods. The old lady would leave me alone tonight. The next morning, the footprints were still there. That had never happened, just like the old lady asking for a specific kind of salt, and just like the child waving. I guess the child waving had nothing to do with the journal at all though, because I had dropped it after he had waved to me. Unless... My hands froze on the jar of peanut butter that I was trying to open. I stared out at the backyard, the blanket to blinding white, the spiraling footsteps, the pine trees frosted with snow. Unless he was trying to scare me, to get me to slip up, make a mistake. I couldn't quite figure out whether the things that haunted this house were sentient. On one hand, they seemed stuck in repetitive behaviors, following rules or orders, like only a wisp of consciousness had been left behind. On the other hand, if the child had waved to scare me, if the old lady had changed her behavior based on what was in the journal, they were definitely sentient, weren't they? I spent the day inside, no choice. More text messages from Michael came in when the service cut in. I didn't respond. It was a mistake to ever start a relationship with him. This was too dangerous. The sunset was a blood red through the pine trees, melting gold and red that painted the snow pink. Then the vivid blue of dusk set in, and that's when the thing in the crawl space woke up. It started the same way it usually did, thumping under my feet, like a grown man was on all fours under the floorboards, crawling back and forth as fast as he possibly could. I had never actually seen what was down there. It was just what I had pictured. Thumping. After a few minutes of this, it changed into single thumps. From the east side of the house from... Oh crap. I jumped off the sofa and ran to my bedroom. The thumping sound was coming from the closet, the weak spot. I slowly creaked the doors open, looked at the floor. The plywood shook as the thing bucked against it. I slammed the door shut. I dug through the hardware drawer and found it, the spare deadbolt. I was always installing new ones. I grabbed the drill and got to work. The thumping increased, and it was trying harder now, thrashing against the plywood with all its might. I drilled in the first screw. One of the boards started to splinter. My hands shook as I screwed in the second, and then the third. I turned the deadbolt and backed away, staring at the doors. I ran back into the living room and barricaded the bedroom door. I didn't have any more deadbolts. I grabbed a chair and I wedged it under the doorknob. And then I heard it. The crunch of tires on gravel. I looked out to see two headlights glowing in the darkness. I stayed, frozen at the peephole, watching. The car door opened. A tall man got out, brown skin, close-cropped, graying hair. Oh no. He walked up to the door and knocked. "Nora, are you in there?" I closed my eyes tight. Michael couldn't be here, he couldn't. I shut my eyes tighter and tighter as if to will him away. I opened my eyes. He was looking at the door, raising his fist to knock again. Behind him, I could just barely make out the outline, the shadow of the thing that makes the footprints, the thing that likes to decapitate. Impossibly tall and thin, standing several yards outside the halo of the porch light, standing still in the snow. I unlocked the door and threw it open. "Come in," I shouted, yanking him by the arm. He stumbled inside and I slammed the door shut, locking every deadbolt. "It's freezing in here," he said, wrapping his arms around himself. "Are you okay? I told you to never come here." "Well, yeah, you weren't answering your phone," Michael said, crossing his arms. "For 2 days, what was I supposed to do?" "Not come here. How'd you even find the address?" "I asked your brother," he said, looking guilty. "Oh, of course." "So you are okay?" "Yes, but you need to get out of here right now." I shook my head. "Tomorrow morning when the footprints are gone." "What the?" He stared at me. "You never should have come here." "What kind of games are you trying to play? You got a man hiding in the closet or something. Something like that." "I'm not. How could you even think of that?" "Because you're acting so weird. You think it's okay to just completely drop off the face of the earth for 48 hours. We've been dating for almost a year, Nora. I thought we were going to." He stopped himself short there, but I could feel the words on his tongue. "Get married." "I promise I'm not cheating on you," I said in a softer tone. "I promise nothing sketchy is going on. It's just, you're not safe here. Look, it's complicated. I know how to stay safe and you don't." "What are you talking about?" "There are things here, like really bad things. For starters, don't go past the room divider over there, okay?" I pointed to the west part of the house. "And don't look at the divider either, except through a mirror." He narrowed his eyes at me. "What the actual?" "See, this is why I didn't want you to come up here. I knew you wouldn't believe me." He opened his mouth and then closed it. He walked past me and collapsed on the sofa. "Just tell me what's going on," he said softly. "This house is sort of haunted, and there are rules that we need to follow to stay safe. But now they got my journal and they're tricking me." I went through the rules with him. "And that," he said, staring at the hole in the wall, the dark blood staining the inside. "That's from one of those things." "Oh, the old lady got in," I said. He stared at the hole in the wall, slowly moved his head back and forth, taking in the entirety of the house, except for the west side. He let out a huge sigh, shook his head, and then looked up at me. "Let's get out of here. We can get a hotel if you don't want to drive all the way back and—" "I can't." "You can't leave." I shook my head. "Why not?" The thing that makes the footprints is still out there. We'll get ourselves killed if we go now." "So in the morning then, or in a few days, whenever the footprints disappear." I stared at the floor. "Nora." "My parents come visit sometimes," I said to the floor. A pause. "I thought your parents died." "They did." Another pause, so heavy it felt like it was crushing me. "They're spirits, they're ghosts. I don't know what to call it, but they come visit me. I can hear them through the door." I finally looked up at him. "I hear their voices again." "That's not possible." He cut himself off. "Okay, their ghosts come to visit you, and they can't come with you. They both died here, so they're tied to the location." "Nora," he said gently, wrapping an arm around me. "I'm sure they would rather see you safe than staying here." "No, they want me to stay, they miss me." No parent would want their kid to endanger themselves like this. I yanked away from him. "Are you saying my parents are bad parents?" "No, I'm saying that." Thumping, a knock at the door. and then a lilting, wispy voice. "Sweetheart, you see, it's my mom. She's here, you see." Tears welled in my eyes, my voice thick. Michael stared at the door, scowling, and then he looked back at me and held a finger to his lips. Slowly, noiselessly, he crept to the front door. "Sweetheart, are you in there?" my mom called. I started to get up, to open the door to tell her, "Oh, I'm here, of course I'm here." "Shh," Michael whispered. Slowly, he lifted his face to the peephole. He peered through. He stumbled back, hand clamped over his mouth. "Michael, that's not your mother," he whispered. "I know she doesn't look, it's been a while." "No, you don't understand. There's no way that thing out there was ever your mother." I stared at him in the darkness. He stood there, staring back at me, his chest rising and falling with every labored breath. I took a step towards the door and he flung his arm out to stop me. "Don't, please." "Sweetheart," my mom's voice called. "No," I whispered, fighting against Michael. I tried to sidestep him, but he blocked me with his body. "Don't." "Are you mad at me? Oh, please don't be mad at me, sweetheart." The voice continued. "I'm right here," I screamed. I ducked under his arm and leapt for the door. Michael grabbed me and pulled me back, my whole body jerking with his strength. He pulled me back towards the guest bedroom. I thrashed and fought against him. He slammed the door shut and locked it. "She's going to think that I'm mad at her," I sobbed. He just shook his head. But I had always known, hadn't I? It felt like something was tearing inside me, like the curtain was finally being pulled back. Because I had to have known. They never called me by my name. I never questioned them for specific details, because I never wanted to. Deep down, I was too afraid of the answers. "I'm sorry," he said, kissing the top of my head. I hugged him tight. "Okay, if the footprints are gone tomorrow, we'll leave." I opened the door and poked my head out. And by the loud thumps coming from my bedroom, the thing in the crawl space had escaped, but it was still locked in the closet. Hopefully that would hold until the morning. I didn't hear my mom's voice anymore, just the howling winds beating against the cabin, the ice cold seeping through the cracks. I shut the door and began to pace. It was so cold. I walked over to the window and parted the blinds, hoping that maybe somehow the tracks had already erased themselves. They hadn't, but I saw something else. A single track of footprints, leading from the tree line coming towards the house and none going back. Oh no. This is what I had always been afraid of. According to the rules, the track of footprints meant that we had to leave. The tracks encircling the house, however, meant that we had to stay. I didn't know what happened when the footprints appeared. That was one of the rules that I had lifted from my great-great-grandmother's journal, but I didn't want to stick around to find out. Thump. Michael and I looked up. Something was in the attic. "What was that?" he asked. "It's..." Rapid footsteps running from one end of the attic to the other and then back again until the sounds were right over our heads, like it knew we were right here. Scratching. Could it tear through the walls like the old lady? "We have to get out of here, but you said..." That thing," I said, gesturing upwards. "Your car is close to the door, we'll have to make a run for it." The sound of splintering wood interrupted me. A jagged crack formed in the drywall, spitting dust, and a pale, bony finger poked through, and then a hand, skin moist and glistening, tearing wildly at the drywall, opening the hole. I ran to the door and threw it open. Michael followed behind me. We ran past my bedroom. Something was shrieking inside, throwing itself against the walls, and down the hallway. I could hear the child crying from the west side. We ran to the front door, my hands twisting and turning all the locks. "Ready?" I asked. "Ready. 3, 2, 1, go." I threw the door open and we ran. My feet pounded into the snow. The cold bit at my face and neck. I raced towards the passenger door. "Sweetheart," my mother's voice. I froze and stared at the window. "Get in the car," I screamed at myself. It's not her, it's not her. But I was frozen. "I was so worried about you. I heard you screaming in the house." Something crunched in the snow behind me. Michael was already in the driver's seat, screaming at me to get in. Over his face, in the reflection of the window, a shadow began to peek out from behind me. I tugged the handle and dove inside. I closed my eyes as something collided with the side of the car, right where I had been standing. Something far, far too massive to be my mother. The engine screeched and we pulled out of the driveway. I stared up at the place. In the window of the west side, I could see the silhouette of a child pressed against the glass, warped and distorted. In the window of the living room, I could see something white and tall, features smoothed over into nothingness, skin wet, peering down at us, like it was made of the snow itself. Behind the cabin loomed something tall and skeletal, spiraling around the structure as it made its endless set of footprints. And in the driveway was a hulking, horrible shape. I closed my eyes tight. The car peeled out onto the road. I would not die in the cabin after all, even though I got close.